Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 280, the times and seasons of the sealing of these set apart ones. The podcast objectives are analyze the great peril of a spiritually mixed multitude, analyze the great peril of endorsing lawlessness, analyze the year of converging crises, and analyze the timing of the sealing. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The great peril of a mixed multitude. Now, in the most recent podcast, we concluded a 4-part series summarizing the people and places of the sealing of these set apart ones. To date, 18 of the 19 podcasts in this phase have been dedicated to analyzing these guidelines. To be quite honest, this was not by design. As in every facet of our ministry, we are being led by the Spirit. And thus, seeing as we have exhausted more than one half of this phase, focusing exclusively on the people and places of the sealing, we conclude the following. The people guideline is the most critical guideline concerning the season of sealing, with specific regards to the time we are living in and the lateness of the hour. As I have said before and often, the sealing of these set apart ones is coming to an end. And although I've been saying this for quite some time now, there is an obvious reason why the Spirit has led me to do so. Think about it. It would be of no use if the true messengers of Elohim warned the people of pending crises at the last minute as opposed to the final hour. For nothing can be done at the last minute. Alas, by that interval of time, everyone's fate will have been determined. Therefore, the true messengers of Elohim, in the spirit of wisdom, are warning all who have been called to obtain the seal of Elohim of the lateness of the hour. And yet, while they have a chance to do something about it. Now, the scriptural phrase for this line is making your calling and election sure. And as it pertains to election, the objective is quite simply this. You must obtain the seal of Elohim, or you will surely die. Knowing this, the Spirit has led me to invest 18 podcasts revealing what the people of the sealing look like. Chiefly, these 18 podcasts have laid a foundation for understanding the Torah of perfection, for it is the belief system of the renewed nation of Israel. Here lies a key inflection point that we have discussed in prior podcasts, dedicated to the sealing and the restoration. And yet, it is fitting that I bring it back to your remembrance at this time. Consider this. Everyone within the renewed nation of Israel will obtain the seal of Elohim. Now, this truth speaks to a key reality about the restoration movement. That is, the majority of those who have associated themselves with this movement are not members of the renewed nation of Israel. This is why I have constantly used the term extended nation when referencing the vast lot of men and women who are claiming to be Yisrael, Yasharal, or some other descriptor suggesting they are members of the renewed nation. On this wise, the extended nation is like the visible church. It includes everyone who has been called and those who have physically joined themselves to the nation. And thus, as in the times of our first Exodus, we find the nation of Israel is indeed a mixed multitude. Here lies the problem, namely, the primary variance in the extended nation of Israel is not physical, it is spiritual. That is to say, the mixed multitude we have witnessed in these last days has nothing to do with our ethnic origins. Quite the contrary, the great divide within the nation today has everything to do with the fact that we are not all being led by the same Spirit. Therefore, while many have been deceived into focusing on physical, i.e., racial differences within the extended nation, the enemy is destroying many within the nation with a wide variety of anti-Mashiach spirits, all of which have crept in unawares for the following reason. As many were overly focused with the physical attributes of the renewed nation, they did not discern the spiritual viruses and diseases that plagued many who physically joined themselves to the extended nation. What they failed to realize is that many of these individuals were never called. Rather, they were instruments of Satan, planted within the restoration movement, who were set to destroy the nation from within. Alas, on the outside, they looked the part, but on the inside, they were as ravening wolves, strategically placed within our fold to devour the many who were called, but were never chosen. Like the tip of the iceberg, the great danger of these impostors lay beneath the surface. Vis-a-vis, the great danger was spiritual in nature, which is why more than half of the extended nation didn't see it. As I said before, we are not all being led by the same Spirit. And this is why they were fooled by the enemy. It's because they were more focused on the physical attributes of Satan's army of fake Hebrews that they completely missed the fact that these infiltrators are spiritually hazardous to the point where they have caused the spiritual deaths of many who were once called. And this, my friends, is why Yahushua Messiah taught us the parable of the wheat and the tares. It's because he knew this day would surely come, and he wanted you and me to be ready for it. No doubt, Satan has largely found success in these counter operations, and yet his success is more about the failure of the many within the extended nation who were never true contenders for everlasting life, let alone the seal of Elohim. Ergo, it is a hollow victory. It is an empty shout of misery. But alas, this is the grave danger we have seen in these last days. This is the great peril of a spiritually mixed multitude, and it is ravaging the extended nation. It is destroying the eternal futures of our people. My question for all who are following this ministry is sure: will it destroy you? The endorsement of lawlessness. Now, I hope you all answered this question in the negative, and I trust you are prepared to overcome the onslaught of lawlessness the enemy has waged against the renewed nation of Israel via the mixed multitude which he has created. And that is the key, my friends. The mixed multitude we have witnessed in these last days is not a creation of Elohim, for he would not author a spiritually diverse body. Besides contradicting hundreds of spiritual precepts, it is for the following reason. A spiritually diverse body is a divided body. In a divided body, i.e., kingdom or nation, will not be victorious, for it cannot stand. And this we know: the renewed nation of Israel will be victorious. It will stand. Not only this, but we will reign with Yahushua Messiah for 1,000 years in his kingdom. And thus, we conclude the following: those who will reign with Yahushua Messiah in his victorious kingdom are those who are living a victorious life in this present age. Now, this inflection point brings us to the question of the hour. That is, how do you live a victorious life in this present age? The answer: you must live a life free of lawlessness and sin. If you recall, I concluded the most recent podcast with a very bold declaration vis-a-vis the greatest threat to your election into the renewed nation of Israel and your attainment of the seal of Elohim is lawlessness. And so I revealed the 80 degrees of lawlessness in that podcast, focusing on the ones which have plagued the extended nation in these last days. And seeing as they are such a terrific threat to our success, I will revisit them for our edification. Now, here you have the first 20 degrees of lawlessness, and we have highlighted doubt, disobedience, contempt, ignorance, deception, rejection, and disillusionment. Next, we have noncompliance, dishonesty, disregard, misconception, and neglect, which we have highlighted. Here we have nonconformance, unrighteousness, irreverence, error, confusion, misjudgment, and greed. And here in the last set of 20 degrees, we have self-reliance, defilement, blasphemy, denial, delusion, failure, iniquity, control, disloyalty, and rebellion. Now, within these 80 degrees of lawlessness lie one of the greatest inflections we have witnessed in this season of sealing. Ergo, I would encourage you to bookmark this one and remember it always as this season comes to an end. The great danger of the mixed multitude lies in their endorsement of lawlessness. On this wise, the spiritual tares who have infiltrated the extended nation are not only men and women who are manifesting the degrees of lawlessness, but they have also deceived themselves and others into believing they are being saved, whilst they embrace a host of spiritual diseases they have contracted from the enemy. Now, it would be one thing If these imposters were plagued by lawlessness and were trying to do something about it, but they're not. And that's how we know they are the synagogue of Satan and they are not being saved. They may physically place themselves in our assemblies and make felonious claims about their heritage, but the truth remains. We, the renewed nation of Israel, are children of the light. We do not walk in darkness. For that reason, the putting off of lawlessness is the critical phase of our election. My dear friends, you must believe me. Those who retain any of the degrees of lawlessness will not be sealed. Ergo, they will not be saved. It's as simple as that. Therefore, I caution you again, beware of those who are contentedly pursuing lawlessness and rationalizing their refusal to guard the commands of Elohim. And do understand their latter end, for it will not be everlasting life. And stay ready, for as I broadcasted in the prior podcast, the next phase in this ministry will be designed to help you take the final step in obtaining the seal of Elohim. Brothers and sisters, I am going to show you how you can eliminate every degree of lawlessness from your life. Now, the only question is, do you really want to be sealed? And has Yahuwah revealed to you that this is the only way he will endow you with his seal? Has he revealed to you that this is the only way you can be saved? Remember, not everyone who claims to be a part of this nation has the spirit of Elohim. And without his spirit, they are none of his, which is why he is not speaking to them. My dear friends, you must believe me. Yahuwah has no intention of saving them. They will not inherit everlasting life for decisions they have made. My question for you is, what decision are you going to make? Will you be like the masses who believe there is a seat for transgressors and lawbreakers at Yahushua's table? Or will you be like the heroes and heroines of faith, and will you receive a crown of life? The year of converging crises. Now, the question many of you might be asking at this time is sure, and I'll ask it for you. How does this all relate to the times and seasons of the sealing of the set apart ones? The answer is sure, and I will offer it as an interest point. The primary indicator of the times and seasons of the sealing of the set apart ones is the great falling away. That is a universal departure from the truth by those who have not overcome the 80 degrees of lawlessness in their lives. We know this because the word of truth explicitly ties the mystery of lawlessness to the great falling away. Moreover, it is impossible to persistently walk in truth and simultaneously walk in lawlessness, for this is contrary to the commands of Elohim. Now, we have much to say about the great falling away. However, I will not be going into great detail concerning this pivotal event in this podcast. Rather, I will address it in an upcoming podcast dedicated to analyzing the sequence of the sealing. In that podcast, we will analyze the sequence of all the major events we have witnessed in the current season of sealing and those we have yet to see. And the great falling away will be one of the primary events we cover. Therefore, I encourage you to stay tuned and be looking forward to that lesson. For lo, if you do not understand the great falling away, you will struggle to understand the times and seasons we are living in. What is more, you will decrease your prospects of obtaining the seal. And this, my friends, is the only reason why I am broadcasting this podcast in advance. It's because I have been commissioned to do everything within my power to help you obtain the seal of Elohim. At this interval in our podcast ministry, that involves you understanding the times and seasons we are living in. Along these lines, we understand the sealing of the set apart ones began approximately 2020 CE, for we have already determined this year marked the end of the restoration of the nation. Below is a timeline of the restoration of the nation of Israel, which we analyzed thoroughly for the last 6 months of the calendar year 2023. As you can clearly see, the restoration ended approximately 2020 CE, a matter which has been revealed to us by the Spirit of Elohim. There are spiritual factors confirming this date, and yet the simplest factor is something close to most everyone's home. Enter COVID-19. Now, if you recall, COVID-19, although it traces its origin to December of 2019, was not declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization until March 11th, 2020. And although COVID has largely subsided in recent years, we have not seen the end of its long-term effects. Now, the question many are asking is, how does COVID-19 mark the end of the restoration and the start of the sealing? The answer, it provides us with a seasonal reference point aligned with the laws governing times and seasons. And here's our first treasure box in this lesson. The laws of times and seasons reveal that seasons follow a predefined sequence similar to nature. Along these lines, summer will always follow spring. By nature, it cannot follow winter or fall. Ergo, it is impossible to have true summer-like conditions unless you are in one of two transitions. Vis-a-vis, you are transitioning from spring to summer or from summer to fall. Now, applying this law to our spiritual reality, we clearly perceive how COVID-19 is a condition of the sifting of the nations. That is, the third of the 7 seasons in these last days, as you can see by the timeline below. Not only this, but we also witness the economic crash of 2020, the result of a fragile world economy exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. Not only this, but we also witnessed a global climate crisis in 2020, as well as civil crises, immigration crises, political crises. The list goes on. The conglomeration of crises in 2020 was so immense, many have begun to refer to 2020 as the year of converging crises. The timing of the sealing. Now, the question is, how does this summation of crises relate to the sealing of these set apart ones? The answer, it provides us with the starting point of this season. in line with the law of seasons. It would be impossible for our world to experience signs of the sifting of the nations during the restoration, for the simple fact that these two seasons are not adjacent to each other, i.e., the same way you cannot have winter-like conditions during the summer, you cannot have birth pains of the sifting during the restoration. Look, this evidence concerning the timing of the sifting of the nations supports one of the greatest revelations in these last days. The revelation is simply this: the crises we witnessed in 2020 are a blueprint for the Great Distress, i.e., what we saw in 2020 will happen again, but on a much larger scale that will lead to the next World War, which we will witness in season 4. I know these things because the Spirit revealed them to me in 2019. And thus, I am able to speak with authority and on behalf of Elohim concerning these matters. Now, I ask you to hear me when I say the sealing of the set apart ones began in 2020. And the fact that this season began with birth pains and warning signs pointing to the sifting of the nations made at least one thing clear, and I will offer it as an inflection point. Unlike the restoration of the nation, which lasted approximately 2 decades, the sealing of the set apart ones will not be a long season by any measure. Likewise, each ensuing season will be shortened in duration, or no one would be saved, not even the chosen elect. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, this is the primary reason why I have taught on this season of sealing with an elevated sense of urgency. It's because the Spirit revealed to us from the beginning that this season would not last long. And although I cannot tell you when the season of sealing will end, by the Spirit, we know the signs we should be looking for. We should be looking for signs of the sifting, for the season of sealing will end the same way it began. Now, here is the final word. Our world is on a deadly course. It's very bad now and about to get worse. My dear friends, you must believe me. Our world is hanging on by a thread, and a converging of crises is just around the corner. Alas, it will be worse than anything mankind has witnessed in the history of our world. And as you clearly know by now, the only protection you will have in this evil day is the seal of Elohim. And so I will not rest until everyone who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry obtains the seal. For the angels of death are preparing themselves even now for the sole purpose to kill. And that, my friends, is real. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 280, the times and seasons of the sealing of the set apart ones. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 282, the messengers of the sealing of these set apart ones. I will post this podcast on Monday, May 20th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.